Hey there, welcome. Glad you're here. In this video, we're going to talk about two supplements that you might be buying right now that I just don't think that you should be. At least that's going to be true for the vast majority of people who would watch this sort of thing. One of them has become commonplace really more in recent years, at least when you look at Google Trend data, that's been the case. And the other has been commonplace for really as long as anyone can remember. So with that said, the first supplement that I think is grossly overrated for most people, at least most people who are taking it, are electrolyte supplements. And now I say for most people because there are use cases where this becomes a very important thing to supplement with. But I do see a lot of people supplementing with this who are just not undergoing those sort of circumstances. So first off, what is an electrolyte? So an electrolyte is any atom or molecule that is ionically bound to another, like sort of electrical charge, that when you place that in water, it dissociates into its two respective components. So sodium chloride, which is what table salt is a molecule or an atom rather of sodium bound to an atom of chloride. You put that in water, it dissociates into one sodium atom with a positive charge, one chloride atom with a negative charge. So in nutrition, an electrolyte is any compound or substance that behaves in this manner. And usually this is referring to minerals such as sodium, potassium, magnesium, and stuff like that. So electrolyte supplementation becomes useful whenever you are experiencing a rapid, acute loss, a short-term loss of electrolytes within your body. Now, with regard to exercise, it's hard to put a sort of very standard set guideline on when they definitively become useful or not, because one, people sweat at different rates compared to others. Two, people tend to lose more or less electrolytes within their sweat compared to others. And in fact, one of the ways that some people tend to adapt to things like cardio is that they will lose less electrolytes in their sweat over time as they train. Usually the recommendation is to sip on a salted beverage with sort of, specific set concentrations of electrolytes that are sort of meant to match the electrolyte concentration within your blood. And you would sip on that either at planned rates or to tolerance as you perform exercise. But what specific type of exercise is going to dictate it can be somewhat variable. One recommendation that is pretty commonly given is any sort of endurance exercise that lasts longer than 60 minutes. And this is true usually irrespective of what setting in terms of indoor, outdoor that this is performed in, because it's just the nature of endurance exercise that because of the way energy is produced, that much more heat is produced as compared to something like lifting, and therefore you sweat more. Obviously, prolonged heat exposure can do it. So if you're going on a hike that's going to be done at a low intensity, but you're going to be out there for 4 hours or something like that, then they can become useful. And then past that, there are a number of different medical conditions that can cause rapid loss of electrolytes, diarrhea being one of them. So bottom line though is that electrolyte supplementation becomes useful when you are doing something or experiencing something that causes a rapid short-term loss in electrolytes. Now, with that said, these aren't lost at equal rates. Sodium is by far lost at the greatest rate. Potassium is usually reported as second, magnesium being third. But if you're going to undergo any problem as a result of electrolyte loss, it's going to be from too little sodium in your body as compared to potassium or magnesium. Now, you could be grossly deficient in these two in your diet elsewhere, and that could be an issue. But for the most part, if someone was going to go on a 2-hour run and they wanted to supplement with electrolytes, the electrolyte that actually matters, that's going to make any real difference, is sodium. Apart from this, though, there is no good rationale to supplement with electrolytes. Now, there could be if you weren't getting enough sodium from your diet or something like that, but this is true for almost nobody. So just to put that into perspective, sodium needs from a daily perspective for someone who is, let's say, average activity level is going to be somewhere between 500 to 1,000 milligrams per day or 0.5 to 1 grams per day. The average intake across all US citizens is usually 3 to 5 grams per day. So that's anywhere from 3 to 10 times as much as people need throughout the day. And now again, just to be clear, with supplementation, your goal is to provide a rapid increase of electrolytes within your body to counteract a rapid loss of electrolytes your body is experiencing. Because again, for everything else that your body would use something like sodium for, getting it from your diet is fine. Now, if you just aren't getting enough potassium, magnesium for your diet, then supplementing with those isn't irrational to do. But again, for the most part, a magnesium supplement is not usually set out to do the same sort of thing as like LMNT or Liquid IV. I'm sorry, I blanked on the name there for a second. Because those will usually have something like 5 times as much sodium as potassium and usually very little, if any, magnesium. So again, just to summarize all this here, from a sort of exercise performance standpoint, the electrolyte that actually matters is sodium. This is why most electrolyte supplements are going to be predominantly sodium in their ingredient formulation. The only time you need to supplement with them is if you are experiencing a rapid loss of sodium, usually which is prolonged heat exposure or prolonged endurance exercise. But something like a 30 to 60-minute lift within a gym that is air conditioned is just not going to cause enough of a sodium loss to justify supplementation. Getting it from diet alone, which most people are very likely doing, is sufficient for all other purposes. Now, with all that said, let's say you are someone who should be taking an electrolyte supplement at various points throughout the week. Let's say you're doing 1 2-hour bike ride in the week and 1 2-hour run in the week. Both of those sort of fitting the bill for when this sort of supplement would make sense. There is really no difference at all between an electrolyte supplement and just plain table salt, apart from two things. So one, the supplement is 20 times as expensive as table salt. I sort of calculated that out right before this. And two, obviously the taste, because table salt in water isn't always going to taste the best. But most electrolyte supplements, especially these days, because they've become so popular, are really not that cheap. So this is a very worthwhile consideration. Now, I have other content discussing what dosing would look like down there. If you're interested in that, I'll link that down below. But just to save time in this video, let's move on to the next one. The next product, which I think is one of the most overrated things ever, are pre-workout supplements. Now, the reason I say this is because the only ingredient in any pre-workout formula that's actually having a pre-workout effect, meaning you take it and 30 to 60 minutes later, there's an effect occurring, is caffeine. And now, just to be clear here, when I knock pre-workout supplements, I'm not knocking caffeine. Caffeine itself has excellent evidence for pretty much all forms of training. However, apart from caffeine, pretty much every other ingredient that you would find in a pre-workout product, no matter what the formulation is, because they're all a little bit different, is not going to have a very short-term effect, which again, if you want a good pre-workout supplement should be one that you take it and an hour later, there's an effect that enhances your workout. So again, they are all different to some degree, but two of which that are probably the most commonly used in formulas is beta-alanine and L-citrulline. And beta-alanine, I have made other content on this supplement before. It is a good supplement. It is good at what it does, but it is not a good pre-workout supplement. And again, it's because there is no effect 30, 60 minutes later after taking it. Beta-alanine works a lot more like creatine, where essentially over time, usually the course of 4 weeks, your muscles become saturated with it, and then its effect can take place. Now, the other ingredient that is very commonly used is L-citrulline, and I have some trouble calling this an actually good supplement. Now, the reason being, the way this is sort of purported to work is that it increases production of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide widens the diameter of your blood vessels, that allows more oxygen, nutrients, blood, stuff like that, to get to the working muscle, and therefore performance and oxidation and all this stuff should be enhanced. And now that's a very clean and pretty sounding mechanism, but when you look at studies that actually compare, does it actually improve performance, whether it's a time trial, whether it's distance completion, whatever it is, compared to placebo, it usually does not outperform placebo. So, but again, even if we were going to make the assumption that it is going to be a good thing to take, usually these sort of effects, the nitric oxide effect, doesn't happen in a short-term manner. It happens over a prolonged period of time of taking it on a daily basis. So just to reiterate, the reason that I'm saying pre-workout supplements are overrated is because caffeine is the only ingredient providing any pre-workout effect, and everything else is just inflating the price for no added benefit. Especially when you consider that buying isolated caffeine is ridiculously cheap compared to buying a pre-workout product. And there are a number of studies where researchers will test specific pre-workout products, energy drinks, stuff like that. And universally, the only ingredient that's actually causing any benefit when they sort of take them all apart and do some sort of mediation analysis and stuff like that is caffeine. Now, with that said, a lot of people notice that they will feel more energized, alert, jittery, stuff like that when they take a pre-workout supplement as compared to something like black coffee, even when the caffeine ingestion is the exact same. And the reason for that is because the way that caffeine is packaged upon ingestion can in fact affect the effect that it has on you. Now, in the case of black coffee, there's a bit of a more robust food matrix that slows the digestion absorption of caffeine and gives it a bit more of a slower spike into your bloodstream. Whereas a pre-workout supplement, it is as isolated and free as it can be. So it just shoots straight from your bloodstream and you feel all the effects very quickly. Now, that said, there are other products and ingredients that would make sense to take from a pre-workout perspective, but you can't really, for these products at least, put them in a pre-workout formula and then have it make sense to market that and sell it to a big number of people. Sodium bicarbonate is a good example of this because sodium bicarbonate is a great supplement. It basically improves your performance on any activity where you hit fatigue within 30 seconds to 12 minutes. I have other content I've created on this specifically. If you want to see that, I'll link that down below. But the thing is with sodium bicarbonate that the dosing matters a lot. Now, with caffeine, you can take too much caffeine and you might be a bit more anxious. You might not sleep great that night and be a little mentally off the rest of the day. But soon enough, you'll be okay. If you take too much sodium bicarbonate and you go on a run or you go hit a squat rack, you will poop yourself. And that just makes for an overall bad day. So that said, there's really no way to, get a good standardized dose that's going to work for everyone, because getting the dose correct for your body size matters. So just to drive this home, as opposed to pre-workout supplements, the alternative that I'm recommending is just to take isolated caffeine in whichever mode you prefer. Usually there is no difference in performance outcomes, no matter how the caffeine is administered, but some forms are just more fun. Some give you that more of that amped feeling, and that itself can be meaningful. There are caffeine pills, isolated caffeine powders. You could just do black coffee. But again, if you forego all of these other ingredients in a pre-workout product, at least, you will get all of the same benefit for significantly less cost. So with that said, that is all I have for you today. I hope you found that somewhat helpful, interesting, or somewhere in between. If you have any questions with anything that I said, don't hesitate to comment down below, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Hope you have a great day, and I will speak to you soon.